Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back, hipsters, to Podcast Land. CRT, or Critical Race Theory.
Critical race theory. But what is it and why is it under attack?
Critical race theory, I must say, to begin with, I hadn't heard the term probably a year ago. Now I hear it every day. I think Americans are just starting to hear it. And I think no one knows exactly what it is. They know it has something to do with race, and it's some kind of a theory.
I agree with all of those suppositions because they are grounded in truth.
I didn't do anything to your great-great-great-grandfather. I don't want to be responsible for that.
And the slave trade was pretty much snuffed out at the beginning of the 1800s.
That's correct.
Those 400,000 imported slaves produced 4 million blacks by the Civil War and 40 million blacks today.
And because of that, and because of their short-sighted desire to bring that anti-white hatred to its zenith as quickly as possible, ultimately, they will create a problem for themselves in the long run as well. Mm-hmm. And that is the instability of the anti-white system, because it isn't based on anything good. It's not based on love. It's not based on productivity. It's not based on
It's not based on human rights.
No, it's based on hatred.
To a white worldview that incorporates 5 white values that we subscribe to. Now, we lie and say that we don't subscribe to these values, but the fact is that we do, and our behavior reflects these 5 white values. In other words, this white value promotes constant competition.
All I'm offering is the truth.
And on the cool check-in, center stage on the mic.
How y'all feel out there?
Excuse me.
Now, question is it hidden in plain sight?
Yeah. What is?
Hidden in plain sight.
This is news to me. Hidden in plain sight.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Please stay tuned.
Hold it now, wait.
Please.
If you don't start using your common sense and acting right, these white people, they're going to kill you.
Ms. Reed.
Kill you. You up here showing out for your white classmates? Yeah, you laughing with them now, but they're going to be the only ones laughing when you dead or in jail.
According to historian and co-editor of Critical Race Studies Across Disciplines, Jonathan Chisholm. Quote, many that are condemning critical race theory haven't read it or studied it intensely. This is largely predicated on fear, the fear of losing power and influence and privilege. The larger issue that this is all stemming from is a desire to deny the truth about America, about racism. Unquote.
Defining CRT.
Critical race theory emerged in the mid-1970s as a response in opposition to colorblind discourses that failed to consider how race and racial inequality are deeply rooted in the legal system. Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, Richard Delgado, Mari Matsuda, Patricia Williams, along with many other racialized scholars and activists, played a pivotal role in advancing CRT as a social and intellectual movement. CRT is guided by several tenets, one of which is recognizing that race is a socially constructed phenomenon that has historical and contemporary significance. A CRT analysis acknowledges how the legacy of much of the backlash surrounding CRT is. But critics of CRT assert that it is divisive anti-American discourse that villainizes white people and indoctrinates young minds. Parents and politicians express ongoing outrage and denounce the use of CRT in elementary and secondary school curricula. Similarly, as colleges and universities commemorated Black History Month in February, some parents contend that Black History Month programs and events reflect CRT principles. The rage among white nationals and extremists has transpired into inciting violence and issuing bomb threats at approximately 16 historically black universities. Read more. Critical Race Theory, Diversity is Not the Solution, Dismantling White Supremacy Is.
I mean, this is just, wow. This is indefensible, what I'm about to show you. I mean, I cover politics for a living, so I see disgusting things all the time, but this is really this is really way up there.
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen. So it's partly human nature, but they are not in denial.
Whoa, what? Excuse me? Let me choose my words carefully. Did you hear what he just said? He's like, with all due respect, and then he just says the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard. He's basically saying, let me get this straight. He's saying that it's okay to have war in Iraq and Afghanistan because they're not civilized? Are you serious? Did you just say that? That's you choosing your words carefully.
I'm sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed. Children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
What's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
On est au 21e siècle, on est dans une ville européenne et on a des tirs de missiles de croisière comme si on était en Irak ou en Afghanistan, vous imaginez?
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
Now, Japan's government has accepted about 400 evacuees from Ukraine and plans to accept more, including those with no relatives or acquaintances in Japan. The evacuees will be tested for the coronavirus before departure and upon arrival in Japan. Those without relatives or acquaintances here will be taken to hotels secured by the government if they test negative on the third day after arriving. The government is considering covering the costs for their daily needs and medical care, as well as Japanese language lessons, job training, and children's education. The government estimates the aid will last for 6 months. Kashiwa City near Tokyo is preparing to receive more Ukrainian evacuees. The city has so far taken in four belonging to 2 families.
Evacuees have long endured hardship before arriving in Japan. We want to give them a warm welcome and provide maximum support.
Kashiwa has secured 4 municipal housing units for evacuees. It also plans to provide financial support for immediate living expenses and an amount equivalent to welfare benefits starting this month.
Okay, there we have it. This is the privilege that Ukrainians are receiving from Japan. And what say you, Vessel 2?
I say that the news anchor who was calling the Ukrainian people primarily European, and he said he had to be careful in his words. Yes. I think he was not being honest. I think Ukrainians and Russians are Asians, and they just look European. They pass, as what we would say. And the breakdown of critical race theory in the last clip also was a good synopsis of what it is and how it is and why people are up in arms about it. And if you really look around the world globally now, in particular with these European-looking Asians migrating up out of Ukraine, last I checked, there was 5.42 million of them. Yeah. And it seems to me that if it wasn't for how they looked as far as their complexion, because it's not their nationality, their complexion. This is solely based on their complexion. The opening of the arms would not be so wide, because that's been proven in the past time and time again. It's interesting also that they have been given a different category of status when it comes to their situation. Other countries, this same problem, they would be considered to be refugees. These are now evacuees. And when it comes to Japan in particular, Japan is bending over backwards to help these people. And the clip said it doesn't matter if they have family members here or not. Japan went over and personally brought people back. I think that's good. I'm glad to see Japan is actually trying to help people who are in need. But at the same time, I don't think Japan would have stepped up so quickly if these people would have been, for example, in a country where a war broke out, where they were actually more heavily melanated.
I agree.
And you have a lot of people who are in Japan currently who have come from parts of the world that are war torn, seeking refugee status here in Japan, and they are denied frequently. Japan has I think 0.5% approval rate of refugees to be allowed to seek asylum here in their country. But all of a sudden, you have these evacuees who are, as they say, welcomed with open arms, and they're going to be given visas, which they stated was 90 days at first, but it's came out later that they are actually going to be able to apply for a year residency. So once they get their residency, they pretty much established here in Japan. As my last checking, there was 600 and some odd number of these Ukrainian people here in Japan already. They're also going to get language school. They're going to go to language school, meaning they're going to be able to learn the language either free or at a very cheap cost. I'm assuming free, which also would allow them to further gain employment. And as I said, I think it's good that Japan is stepping up and helping people who are in need. But I also hope that they realize that Japan is not a foreign-friendly country. And other foreigners in the country can use especially the language services that they're providing to these people in need.
Right.
If they can supply these people with this amount of service because they're in need of the service, then I think they should go ahead and realize that other people are in need also of the same services. I'm not saying they have to give it to everybody else for free. That's unrealistic. But if they are really concerned about how people who are living in their country that are not foreigners are able to contribute back into the communities, then yeah, they need to stop with all the nonsense of learning their language. They've had 70 years to learn English and refused to learn English collectively. So now everybody else in the world has to speak Japanese, and everybody gives Japan the pass, when if that was another country, people would be looking at that country like, what's wrong with you? You've had so much time on the books to learn this language. Every other Asian country here surrounding Japan seems not to have a problem with learning the language. So do we baby Japan? Yes, I think we do. When it comes to the language, they should be able to speak the language like everybody else, and that would eliminate the struggle for a lot of people in the country when it comes to learning their complicated language, which they made complicated because they didn't want foreigners to be able to understand their language. But yes, this critical race theory, it has now, in my view, in my outlook, has now become global. And it is vivid that it's not a theory. It's critical that the white race, the European looking race, remains theoretically dominant with 5.42 million European looking Asians migrating out of their country into other parts of Europe. They're already sending back African refugee and asylum seekers in England. They're sending them back to Africa, Rwanda, I heard. So if that's the case, they're getting rid of the responsibility of taking care of the people who they themselves invaded their countries and went to war with those people. Now they're kicking them out and accepting people who more so look like them. But the people that they're bringing in now, as far as the Ukrainian people, I don't know. I'm assuming. I'm just seeing what I see on TV. They're not coming from a poor. I mean, they're not coming from a rich country. They're coming from maybe like Africa. They come from a mineral enriched landmass. But the people themselves, they look poor. So are they going to be considered class-wise the same? And we know Europeans, it's all about class. So I wonder how they will be treated, you know, in Europe. Not that it really matters, but I wonder how this is all going to turn out. But yes, critical race theory it hasn't gone nowhere, and I'm pretty sure it's not in the news media as far as America's concerned now, but it should be. And Black, brown, and all melanated people around the globe should be looking at this and doing their best to be aware of European values, and any value that you see that you have participated in, you should steadily back yourself away from that, because it is not good to sit up and have the same values that lead you to destruction. What say you, Bessalon?
Well, I mean, you covered everything that need to be covered. There's not too much left for me to speak on. But the only thing I could just truly say is that obviously I believe there's some form of greasing of the palms under the table, per se, for most of these countries that's accepting Ukraine. Like you mentioned, I have a real quick clip from George Galloway, and he talks to this caller, and he kind of pulled the rug from under this guy's feet when he says, to clarify what you said before, that they're not part of, they don't consider them part of the Europe standpoint. They really consider them more Asian. So we can go into that, and after that, I can probably tell you a little bit more of, or to answer more of the question you posed. So here we go, George.
Hear from Matthew in Sweden. Let's hear what he's got to say. Matthew, go ahead.
Hey there, George. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. All points of view, welcome here, mate.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I just wanted to call in and talk about, obviously, the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. First of all, I want to extend solidarity to the people of Ukraine because they didn't ask for this, and there are people, civilians, suffering and dying in Ukrainian cities now, and I want to extend solidarity to them. I also think I've been listening to the show today, and there are some things I want to take issue with. I mean, you had your previous guest, Richard Medhurst, saying it's been reckless of Germany to send weapons to defend Ukraine. I mean, this is breathtaking. We've had a war of aggression launched by Vladimir Putin against geographically the largest country in Europe, a country of 42 million people.
No, Russia's the largest country in Europe, and Ukraine's the second largest.
Okay, you can say that. That's fine. But if we're talking about
no, it's quite telling because you don't really regard Russia as a European country, do you?
Oh, come on! It's Asia. It's the top half of.
I got you, man.
Come on.
I got you. You fell right into my bear trap. You're a racist dog. You fell right into my trap. You do not accept that the Russians are European. You've just actually admitted it live on air. Be gone with you.
So yeah, there you go. The Europeans now trying to claim or somewhat claim, but they really consider Russia more Asian. So yeah, there you have it.
Yeah, this is it's nonsense. This is nonsense. Europe and Soviet Union was never one. That was two different hemispheres. And if you look at Europe, Europe itself is not a continent. So if you look at Europe and somehow, some way, you magically erased all the borders that the Europeans made for everybody's country, that whole spot is Asia.
As a Latino in this country, I kind of want to ask your opinion on white privilege because I think I saw something on Facebook. Someone shared like a video or a picture, and I kind of want to just get your views on it, if you could, please.
Awesome. White privilege is racist. White privilege is a lie, and it is a myth.
Could you elaborate?
Happy to. White privilege is racist. Let's go through it. As soon as you begin to categorize certain individuals based on skin color, that in of an essence is racism. It is. If you say, oh, you're privileged because of your skin color, are you kidding me? I mean, you don't know about my background or my upbringing. All of a sudden you're generalizing an entire group of people just based on their skin color. That is racism. The definition of racism is putting a specific definition onto a group of people based on their skin color, a prejudice just based on their skin color. That is racism, whether it's a good prejudice or a bad prejudice. That is racism. Is it a lie? Absolutely it's a lie. Now, have Caucasian Americans generally done better over the last, 100 years? Yeah, that's correct. But there's also other communities that have done much better. Asian Americans, for example. I never hear about Asian American privilege. Asian Americans are the wealthiest, most productive, least likely to commit crimes members of the American community. Where's their privilege? Is their privilege based in skin color? Absolutely not. There's privilege based in making good choices. When you make good choices, those choices are rewarded. Asian Americans entered mostly in the 1940s and 50s fleeing communism and Marxism. By doing so, they came into the American community widely discriminated against. In fact, if you ask your grandparents what they think of people from Asia, they won't say very nice things, especially your great-grandparents if they're still alive. They made very good choices. They did the three things you need to do to stay out of poverty in America, according to Ben Shapiro, which is you got to graduate high school, get a job, and get married before you have kids. And over the last 60, 70 years, they are by far the richest group that you can point to based on race in America, by far. So here's the perplexing thing, is that I said it's racist, and it's a lie. What else did I say about it? I said something else. It's very divisive, extraordinarily divisive. Because if you're going to start to categorize people just based on their skin color, then they're nothing more than that racial group. They're not an individual. It's not saying that you could rise above your circumstance. It's not saying you can make good choices. It's not saying that, oh, you might have been born behind and you can get ahead. We want to talk about white privilege. Here's a good question. And anyone who here believes in it, please step up to the microphone. We can have a discussion. It's a little, I don't think it'll offend anyone, but it might bring someone back. Here's a really good question to ask. Are Jewish people privileged? Are Jewish people white? Anyone? Are Jewish people considered white? Technically they are.
If you consider their history, I would say not.
Oh, they're not white. Then what are they?
They're Semites. They're from the Middle East, at least historically speaking.
Okay, so we don't have that as a box to check on the U.S. Census Bureau.
I think there should be.
Okay, so they should be Semites. Okay.
Well, not Semites, but
well, I mean that is the technical definition. But for lack of a better term, they are considered white.
I'm white and I'm Jewish, and I don't think that I'm considered anything but.
Yeah. So let's go to this.
I don't think it's a monolith, though. I mean, I think you can if you identify as white and a Jew, like that's fine. But I know like there are a lot of people who have a lot of connections to, especially like Israel.
Yeah. So but here's the point. Here's the point. The question is, if you categorize them as white, which you don't, most do, did they really have that good of a 20th century? Were they really privileged over the last 100 years? Really?
No.
Yeah, they had an extermination order put up against them in an entire continent. Here's the point, is that if we are going to try to segregate the American populace based on skin color, that is the very definition of everything that we have tried to fight against in this country. Everything. And despite even historical and statistical trends, it just isn't true. There's twice as many white people living in poverty in America than black people. Do they live at a higher rate? Absolutely they do. You talk in aggregate numbers, it doesn't reflect to that. So look, here's the point, is that it is anti-individual, and it is very much this idea of racial group collective that I think is extraordinarily harmful and creates this victimhood mentality that pits one group up against the other, that does not reward what America truly is, which is a place where good choices will eventually be rewarded. Go ahead and say something in response if you want to.
Yeah, just I guess one follow-up question. So you don't think that specifically regarding the United States, like the crippling, like systematic oppression of like the 60s and before that has like any kind of effect whatsoever on African American communities?
Great question. Okay, I'm glad you asked that. Say it again. So say it again, because I want to.
Do you think that the systematic oppressive laws of the 60s and prior to that have any kind of effect whatsoever on African American communities today?
Sure they did, but didn't the internment camps against Asian Americans in the 40s have something against them? They rose above it, right? So here's the question. Is America more racist today than we were in the 1960s? It's a legitimate question. Can anyone possibly say we're more racist today? No. Then why are blacks worse off today than they were in the 1960s? It's not because we're a more racist country. We're much less racist in every single metric. It's because we've incentivized bad behavior over the last 60 years. Black single motherhood was 18% in 1965. It's now 71%. What happened? Is it because we got to be a more terribly racist country? No. Did we get more racist laws? No, we actually got rid of most of all of them. Civil Rights Act, we got rid of almost every single one. So what happened? It's because we incentivized really, really bad behavior. We said to single mothers, go ahead, have kids, and we'll give you a check every single month. But don't get married. As soon as you get married, you lose the check. We put African Americans in urban areas and housing projects that, again, incentivize bad behavior. And that was the advancement of the American welfare scheme. Also coupled with failing public schools, run mostly by teacher unions that were not properly incentivized to try to get the people out of poverty that were very much in. By every single metric, African Americans are worse off today than they were in the 1960s, with crime, prison rates, single motherhood, employment, wealth capita, everything. And there's only one possible explanation for that. It's not that America got more institutionally racist, not any of that stuff. It's that there was a set of policies put forth by one president and continually supported by entire political party to keep a whole segment of the population poor and routinely voting Democrat. And that's Lyndon Baines Johnson and the American Democrat Party, which I think completely punished it. So if you want to talk about systemic oppression and racism, there's lots of other examples of ethnic groups that went through that too. If that's the card you want to play, it does not couple. Almost every single one except African Americans and Native Americans have not rose above it statistically. And the only thing they have in common is absolute total government interference and involvement in their life.
And that says a lot.
So yeah, it's all about the hijacking, word hijacking that, the forked tongue people actually are good at. It's their language, so this is how they speak. You gotta listen for it. You gotta pay attention because it's there in your face at every turn. And if you don't pay attention, then you'll fall for anything.
There you go.
And
Well,
I'm on a campaign where I believe the world should wake up. If we are how the Europeans say and view us to be, and we play the color game, then 90 to 95% of the global population is colored. Europeans are 5%. I'll give them 10% of the global population. It's just my opinion. I'm not a promoter of my opinion. I'm just sharing my opinion. But I say that everybody who is non-European should take on the value of thinking and voicing the fact that all Europeans need to be in Europe. They need to go back to Europe. They don't belong in your country, making your country suffer at the hands of their pleasure. If that is the case, then collectively, you need to get together and tell them Europeans to go back to Europe. It doesn't have to become violent. It just has to be a united front to have the same exodus out of Ukraine right now in every country. And all the Europeans need to go back to Europe. If they stay in the country, then they should not definitely be in any type of power or leadership position when it comes to governing another country, because they have done all but good in every situation that I can see. Just my opinion.
Well, I totally agree with you. And we will return sometime in the near future to update this situation. We time fleeced, and we are limited. But hopefully, people out there in podcast land, you hipsters, stay tuned, and I hope what we brought to you was eye-opening and useful. And as Vessel 2 says, I guess you should consider joining this exodus of Europeans out of the country and having control, which has not thus far over the years that they have been in your country or the country that they're resided in, has done any useful or positive things. And on that note, Vessel 1, Vessel 2 is signing out. Vessel 2, would you mind giving us your final thoughts?
Thank you, Vessel 1. Today we went ahead and broke down critical race theory. Critical race theory is a conversation that mainly started in the States, but as we are pointing out, it is global. And the only thing I think that the conversation to be had now is to have open conversations about nationality, and there's only one race. Pinpoint out someone's nationality and go from there. By all means, nonviolence and non-compliance should be the motto. Please stand on your square. If there is a loved one out there that you consider to be a loved one, make sure they know. Stay virus free. Stay safe. Peace.
Peace.